Welcome back to our adventure with this 97 triple locked Land Cruiser. So you remember how dirty that interior was? Now we're going to start looking at the engine bay and go through all the filth in there and get it cleaned up. Ever get started on a project, excited, motivated, and you get into it, and for one reason or another, you get to a point where you're like, yeah, maybe I should just sell this thing. None of the mechanical stuff's difficult. It's just bolts, nuts, and gaskets and O-rings. I'm really too old for it at this point and don't have the patience for is all the gross, dirty, nasty stuff that's built up over the years. Underneath every screw you turn, there's crumbs of dried up oil and grease spilling on your head. I'm not gonna stop, don't worry. I'm gonna keep going, guys. I wanna follow this one through, make sure to finish it, enjoy it for a little while, and then move on to another project. I'm not gonna stop, I'm just really frustrated. Let me know in the comments if you guys have run into similar situations, and for whatever reasons. I'm curious to know what everybody else runs into. But that's where I am right now. Wish me luck. If this is your first time watching, welcome to the channel and thank you for the support. Make sure to check out the other videos on this project, where we got it from, how we came to acquire it, and make sure to subscribe to see the rest of the updates on how the rest of the project goes and the restoration of this 1997 triple locked Toyota Land Cruiser. Uh-oh, I forgot. I took the seats out. How am I gonna back this thing up? I'm sitting here in the car with no seats. I can barely see over the steering wheel. Look at that, there's nothing in here. I'm just sitting on the floorboard. This is my view here, let's see. This is what I'm looking at. My head is about this level right now. Thank goodness I'm just barely tall enough. The first thing I did was use about, I think, 6 cans of this stuff. That's about the best degreaser I've found. The Gunk original formula. Not the foaming or any other ones, just the original. You want to spray it on, give it maybe at least 5 minutes. Closer to 10 minutes would be great. And it'll get most of the residue and stuff off of there. You can see there's a little bit of stuff left, but overall I got most of the oil residue off of the surfaces. I want to get as much as I could off before I get started doing anything. That way it's a little bit cleaner to work on. As I take parts off, I'll obviously get them cleaned and everything before I put them back on. Yeah, there was a bunch of gunk over here from the distributor O-ring leaking. All of that's gone. All of the oil on the front of the cylinder head coming from the valve cover gasket's all gone. Cleaned up pretty well. Let's see, it's difficult to see down there, but you can see some shiny surfaces showing through. It's a lot cleaner than it was before. I couldn't even see those timing marks, those right there previously, and you can actually see them now. So it cleaned up a decent amount of oil residue and grease and everything that built up over the years. I also sprayed down the axles and everything down here with a pressure washer. I went ahead and hit them all with a pressure washer just to get all of the stuff that had dripped down and dried on the axle and everywhere underneath really well. You can see there's still a lot of residue right there around the burr fields and the knuckles from them leaking over the years. I'm assuming they've been leaking for a long time. I also tried to get underneath the oil pan and everything to get as much grease as I could off of there. I do want to get everything as clean as possible, but the other thing that I want to make sure to do is get as much oil off of everything so that I can tell where things are leaking from. There were, like most of these trucks, or really anything that's leaking for this long, oil leaks down the front or fluids, and then as you're driving it splashes underneath the car, the wind carries it, and it covers everything under there in oil residue and grease and everything, and you can never really tell where it's coming from after there's that many years worth of stuff just coating everything. But it does make a good rust protector, I guess. Anyway, so wanted to get it all clean, that way as I go through all of this, get everything replaced, the seals, the gaskets and all, we can come back and drive it for a while, and if there's anything additional leaking, we're able to locate it instead of just having everything covered in oil. So we got it degreased, and we've got a lot of work to do on this thing. So instead of doing one section at a time, I think how I'm going to get these components replaced is look at it as one entire project. So if you guys need tips and tricks on how to remove or replace certain things, you may have to look through a couple of different videos to get everything that you need out of them. First, we're going to start by draining the coolant out of the bottom of the radiator. We're going to get the fan shroud, the fan clutch, all of that off, take the radiator out to give ourselves a lot more room to work up here. Then after that's off, I'm going to start working on the front of the motor. We're going to get this elbow off, replace the O-rings and the gaskets for that. The thermostat housing, wow, that cleaned up really well. The thermostat housing, replace the thermostat, the gaskets there. Get all these pulleys and belts off. I'm going to inspect the idler pulleys. If they're bad, the bearings are making noise or grinding, we're going to replace those as well. The water pump, the oil pump cover in the front, the O-ring for that we're going to replace. The belts, obviously, when things go back together. I'm going to check the harmonic dampener, which is the crankshaft pulley. Make sure that the rubber on that is not super dry. If it is, and you're ever in there, you want to go ahead and replace the crankshaft pulley as well. It's a little bit expensive. Most people don't replace them, but it is really good practice to replace that every time you're in there doing a front main seal, which we will be doing on this guy as well, since we'll have all of that apart. Then, as things go back together, we're going to put all new hoses and clamps everywhere. I am going to take the intake manifold off, at least the upper section. While we're in there, we're going to replace some vacuum hoses that are underneath that, and get all those freshened up, make sure we don't have any hard, brittle hoses left there that might be causing vacuum leaks. We're going to obviously get new plug wires, distributor cap, rotor, distributor O-ring, because it is leaking on there, valve cover gasket, all of the donuts that go into the valve cover around each spark plug valley. And while we've got a lot of this stuff off, I'm going to try to just use a soft bristled brush and degrease everything that I can. If I don't run out of patience, I'm also going to try to get the exhaust manifold gaskets replaced while we have a bunch of this stuff apart and we've got easier access to it all. In addition to all of the maintenance and all of that stuff, we're also going to replace all three motor mounts. Well, the two motor mounts. One is right about here. You've got another one right about in the same spot on the other side of the motor, and then you've got a large one in the back. It's a transmission mount. Mounts the back of the transmission to the chassis up there to the subframe. So we're going to replace those as well. I can see this one and it's dry, like most of them are at this point after this many years, and I'm assuming the other ones are too. It's not really shaking or vibrating a bunch, but I do want to go ahead and get them replaced for myself to enjoy the vehicle a little bit better while I do keep it, and then the next owner will obviously have the benefits of having all of those replaced as well. And then all of the common heater control valve and hoses and all of those things will get replaced. All right, let's get this radiator drained. Getting under the truck, first thing we want to do is remove the skid plate. We got a few bolts, let's get that off. Y'all, look at the mess under here. I don't know how much of it you can see, but it was really difficult trying to get all that stuff off without covering myself in grease. But I got this hose off. I think that's for the transmission fluid, if I remember right, that runs into the radiator. So let's figure out if we can get one of the coolant hoses off. This radiator doesn't look like it has a drain. There's the little knob for the drain plug. Looks like somebody obviously tried to take it off, twisted it off, maybe because it was stuck, and they just left it. And that's, like I said, at least where one of the coolant leaks was. Oh well, we're gonna fix it all. All right, change of plans. I'm getting covered in junk down there, so I'm gonna start with the shroud, the fan, and the fan clutch. Let's get those off. All right, I got the bolts off the top of the shroud, that one and this one. I've got the nuts off of the 4 studs for the fan clutch bracket. And normally, what you would do is loosen up the tension bolt for the alternator, so you could take the tension off of these 2 belts right here. And as soon as those belts come off, then this pulley and this bracket and everything are loose enough to where you can pull the fan off of the fan and the clutch off of the bracket I don't care about these belts. They're all going in the garbage. So I'm just gonna cut them, make it easier on myself, leave the alternator alone for now, and then deal with it after I get some more components on. A little bit all over the place. I keep getting bored of, or frustrated of doing certain parts, but we've got the fan shroud off, fan and clutcher off. I cut the belts off. They are down here. I got spark plug wires out. Number 6 was kind of stuck, so I cut it. The boot for number 6, I don't know if you can see it, it's still in there. Got the valley covers off. PCV hoses and all of that are off. Let's see, what else? Intake hose and the cover are off. And we've got fluids here dripping. So let me show you this. So we're up here, right? If you've ever done one of these before, you know that down there, there's a little tiny white valve, plastic one, that you open, and it's the drain for the radiator. It was broken off, and it was also leaking out of the port where it goes. And so that's one spot where coolant was leaking. And instead, what I did, this hose here, this radiator hose, I just took my box knife and put a slit at the bottom of it and let it drain from the bottom of that. That seemed to be the lowest point. So that works. It's still dripping a little bit. I'm going to let it continue draining, and then we'll continue either later today or tomorrow. Need a break at this point. I'm going to go grab a beer. You ever get started on a project, excited, motivated, and you get into it, and for one reason or another, you get to a point where you're like, yeah, maybe I should just sell this thing and start with another project. It's kind of where I am now. Not because any of this is difficult. I've taken these trucks apart, put them back together, all sorts of different ways, all sorts of different conditions, many times over the years. I think this is 80 series number 16 or 17 for me. None of the mechanical stuff's difficult. It's just bolts, nuts, and gaskets and O-rings. What I'm really too old for at this point and don't have the patience for is all the gross, dirty, nasty stuff that's built up over the years. Underneath every screw you turn, there's crumbs of dried up oil and grease spilling on your head. It's all over you. Not like you can wear gloves to avoid it. It's really frustrating. Mr. Last Owner, couldn't you at least do an underbody wash? Something. I'm not going to stop. Don't worry. I'm going to keep going, guys. I want to follow this one through, make sure to finish it, enjoy it for a little while, and then move on to another project. I'm not going to stop. I'm just really frustrated. Let me know in the comments if you guys have run into similar situations, and for whatever reasons. I'm curious to know what everybody else runs into. But that's where I am right now. Wish me luck. All right, let's get this radiator out. If you need a step-by-step on how to remove and install the radiator on these things, these 80 series Land Cruisers and LX450s, I have a very detailed video on the channel. Just look through the videos in the LC80 and LX450 playlist, and you'll find it a real detailed video focused just on the radiator remover and install. So I'm not going to show it all in detail in this video. I'm going to go ahead and get this guy out, and then I'll show you what the aftermath looks like. Some kind of a zip tie. What is this? that's the wiring for the winch that's not wired up. Let's get that cut off. The radiator's out. Let's go toss this thing in the trash. We'll see what we're working with here. Okay, we got a lot more space. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to be replacing all of these hoses. Pretty much every coolant hose I can get my hands on, every vacuum hose I can get my hands on. They're all going to be replaced. So I'm going to go ahead and get some of these out of the way. To free up some space, I'm going to get that alternator out. We've already got the battery and the battery box out, as you can see. I'm going to get the alternator and the bracket out. At some point, all of the intake manifold and everything are going to come out as well. We're going to redo the gaskets, vacuum hoses underneath. And they all seem okay. I did a vacuum test and it seems to hold pressure, but the engine block's real dirty down there. It's really bothering me. So I'm gonna go ahead and take all that off just so I can get my hands on that and clean it best I can. It's not gonna be perfect, but we're gonna get it clean. Let's see, the AC condenser, surprisingly in really good shape, and the AC blows super cold, so we're probably okay there. Those are a couple wet spots from when I took the radiator out. That's the transmission cooler, the auxiliary, and it's running well too. Everything looks good up here. I'm gonna leave all this alone. Let's go ahead and get the, let me see, can I turn that off? All right. So that's the lower radiator hose. We're gonna get that off, get that one off. Thermostat housing's coming off. And then this whole assembly with the water pump, the coolant neck here, we're replacing all the O-rings in there because they are leaking. All of that's coming off, new water pump, and all of that's going on as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove all of those, remove the alternator as well, free up as much space as I can up here, because I'm also going to be replacing, oh, that pulley's coming off as well, that idler pulley and that idler pulley as well down there, the AC idler pulley and the main idler pulley. Those were both coming off. Then, before we put any of the new components back on for any of that stuff, the crank pulley's coming off. Front main seal's getting replaced. The oil pump cover, which is right there, is coming off. The O-ring around that is getting replaced. I'm going to check the condition of it while we're in there. And before any of these pulleys or anything go back on, I'm going to try to clean whatever I can get my hands on. So let's see, what should we do next? Alternator, water pump, coolant hoses. Alternator is off. Hose right there. Alternator bracket at the top is off. Alternator bracket at the bottom is off. The idler pulley that went right there is off. And I took also the coolant neck that was up, this is the distributor. I'd taken that off before. Coolant neck that went right here off. As you can tell, I put some of this bolts and the nuts and things back, but this is, I don't know how well you can see it in the video. It's caked up so thick you can't even see where the flanges and things meet together. This is some of what we're looking at up here. I mean, that's ½ inch thick in some places. Just years and years of dripping and dirt and everything else. So that's where we are so far. Had a little bit of hard time taking that idler pulley off. Somebody over tightened it. Last time around it was changed, or maybe it was like that from the factory and that's the original, I don't know. But it was on there very tight. The bearings weren't terrible, but it did have a little bit of grinding sound, but not really any play. But it's definitely time to replace it. Next, before I get to the crank pulley, I'm gonna get the water pump off. There's a little bit of gunk on there. You can't see all the bolts, but there's bolts around the housing, up around here, and at the bottom as well. If you have your new water pump that you're going to be putting on, you'll be able to take a look at that and see where the bolts go through. But it's a bunch of 12mm head bolts. Going to get those off, get the water pump off, and then after that, I'll probably cut that belt off. We're not going to be reusing it, so I'm going to cut it off. And before I mess with anything at the bottom, I'm going to pull the crank pulley out, and keep an eye on the next part of the video. I'll show you the nifty tool that one of the wonderful members in the Land Cruiser community makes to be able to get the crank pulley off, and not have to use your starter, and then also be able to hold it in place while you're trying to torque it to the correct torque specs on the way on while you're tightening it. Real neat tool. Keep an eye out here on the next part and I'll show you exactly what it is and who to get it from. So let's check this guy out. This is a 3/4 inch pry bar extension, 48-inch extension. And this guy here, it is a little adapter plate. As you can see, my 3/4 inch is shoved into that square hole right there. It's got a bolt here and a bolt here that attaches it to two spots that are threaded on the crank pulley. And you want to get a long pry bar. Don't use a 1/2 inch, get a 3/4 inch. You will break a 1/2 inch. Let me show you. There's my 1/2 inch, and boom, it's busted. I try to use the 1/2 inch for the socket on the crank pulley socket right there. There's the piece of it stuck in there. I couldn't find my, I have another 3/4 inch long bar but I couldn't find my socket that had the 3/4 inch attachment on it. So try to cheat with the 1/2 inch. Didn't work out. I'm gonna go ahead and call it a night at this point. It's probably 1 a.m. I need to get some sleep. But tomorrow I'm gonna go scouring the back garage where all our storage is and find my 3/4 inch set of sockets, and then we'll be able to get this crank pulley off. No, I'm not going to use the starter trick. Everything's already disconnected anyway, so it wouldn't matter. But we're going to do it correctly with these tools, and then we're going to use the exact same method to torque it back on so that we can set the torque specs correctly. I think it's 320 some odd foot-pounds. We'll look it up before we do it. So learn this lesson from me. Don't use a 1/2 inch on the crank pulley for either holding or for the crank bolt. Hope you guys enjoyed this video so far. Join me on the next one and we'll continue the work and the adventure. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can get updates when I do upload new videos. In the meantime, love you guys. Have a good night. See you next time.